In June 2020, two men entered a police station in Tamil Nadu for a minor lockdown violation. They never returned home. Their deaths were not an accident, but the result of a nights-long assault by the very officers meant to uphold the law. 4 years later, a Madurai Court reached a conclusion rarely seen in the Indian legal system. It sentenced 9 police officers to death for murder. In a country where thousands of custodial deaths are reported every decade, a collective death sentence for an entire group of law enforcement officers stands as a statistically rare event. To see how a local dispute over shop hours transformed into a case that forced the highest levels of the judiciary to intervene, we have to look at what actually happened on the streets of Sathankulam. June 19, 2020. The town of Sathankulam was under the strict movement restrictions of the first COVID-19 lockdown. Police detained 59-year-old Jayaraj and his son, Bennicks. The official report claimed they were arrested for keeping their mobile shop open past curfew, and that they had resisted arrest so forcefully that officers had to use physical restraint. But the CBI's later investigation told a different story. Jayaraj had recently stepped in to mediate when officers were bullying local laborers. This interference created a personal grudge, and the lockdown violation was used as a pretext to bring him in. Bennicks was not even a target initially. He was locked up only because he followed his father to the station to ask why he was being detained. These arrests were not a measure of public safety. They were a targeted attempt to re-establish police dominance over a civilian who had dared to question an officer's behavior. Once the station doors closed, Jayaraj and Bennicks were subjected to a sustained physical assault that lasted overnight. The severity of the violence was documented by a gruesome requirement. The men's clothing was so saturated with blood that the police refused to present them to the magistrate until their family brought them fresh outfits to hide the injuries. Despite being remanded to judicial custody, the internal damage was already done. Unable to recover from the extensive trauma, both men died within 3 days of their arrest. While the station attempted to follow this standard protocol for a cover-up, the sheer scale of the physical evidence made it impossible to dismiss the deaths as natural or accidental. Despite the pandemic restrictions, the local community erupted. The news of the father and son dying in tandem triggered a wave of protests that made the town's anger impossible for the state to ignore. This public pressure prompted the Madurai bench of the Madras High Court to take suo motu cognizance. They bypassed the standard slow-moving local inquiry and demanded a direct status report on the investigation. The case was handed to the Central Bureau of Investigation, which moved quickly to arrest the station house officer and his team. Their forensic evidence proved that the original lockdown violation FIR was a complete fabrication. The trial that followed spanned 6 years and 47 hearings. The defense utilized constant delays and bail applications, a process so long that one of the accused officers died of COVID-19 before he could be sentenced. The fact that this case reached a conviction at all was not a result of the system self-correcting. It was the result of a widespread public outcry that made a quiet dismissal of the facts politically impossible. The court's final judgment branded the murders a rare and uncommon case, focusing on the extreme nature of the cruelty involved. Along with the death sentence for the 9 officers, the court ordered 1.4 crore rupees in compensation. Notably, this money is to be recovered directly from the personal assets of the convicted officers. This verdict establishes a significant legal precedent in India, signaling that a police badge does not provide a permanent shield against prosecution for state violence. But the Sathankulam victory is a stark outlier. In the 2023-2024 period, there were over 150 reported deaths in police custody and more than 2,000 in judicial custody. Against those thousands of cases, a conviction like this remains a singular event. Part of the reason these numbers persist is a specific gap in the law. India has signed the UN Convention Against Torture, but has not ratified it, and it currently lacks a dedicated domestic anti-torture statute to define and punish these acts specifically. Even when safeguards do exist, like the Supreme Court's mandate for 24/7 CCTV in every station, they are frequently bypassed. Officers often claim equipment failure or missing data to prevent their actions from being recorded. The 9 convicted officers are now in a central jail, but they face a multi-year appeals process. The final execution of this sentence will likely be debated in the High Court and the Supreme Court for years to come. The Sathankulam case proves that the law can hold the state accountable, but it shouldn't require a viral national tragedy to do so. For justice to be a standard rather than a rarity, the system's primary focus must shift from protecting its own to protecting the public.